Let me discuss the essay Entertainment and Utopia by Richard Jaya, who was born in 1945. He is a professor at King's College London at the Department of Film Studies. He had his doctorate from the Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, and he specialized in Italian cinema, queer theory, relationship between entertainment and representations of race, sexuality, and gender. And there are several works by him like White Essays on Race and Culture, Stars, Heavenly Bodies, The Culture of Cures, In the Space of a Song, and so many other works. And Entertainment and Utopia is one of the most discussed works by him. Work by him. Okay. So in this essay, he is discussing entertainment and utopia. In the first part, he is giving a definition of the term entertainment, and he is distinguishing professional entertainment and other types of entertainment. Then he is proceeding with utopian. What is utopianism? The ideas, different qualities or different aspects of utopianism. And in the third part, he is associating that idea of utopianism, how it is present in entertainments by using certain examples of musicals. So let us begin the essay. In the first part of the essay, he says that he is currently dealing with musicals as an entertainment. There are different ways in which we can analyze musicals. There will be people who argue that it's just an art. There will be people who tries to understand the political ideologies or other kinds of ideologies behind it, like the manipulation, arguing that it's a manipulation. Or there will be people who are trying to uncover the psychological effects of it. But he is not dealing with any of these things, but he is addressing music as just entertainment. Okay. And at the same time, he is not disagreeing with people who are coming out with other kinds of interpretations as well. So he says that musicals is generally can be categorized into those programs which are usually considered as part of showbiz. So there are different varieties of programs which we normally put it under the category of showbiz, like music hall, variety, TV spectaculars, pantomime, cabaret, and there are so many other items which we categorize as showbiz. So the idea of entertainment I want to examine here is most centrally embodied by these forms. Although I believe that it can also be seen at work in other forms, and I suggest below informally how this might be so. So this idea of entertainment may be present in other forms of performance as well, like theatrical performance or film performance and all. But in these showbiz, it is purely entertainment oriented. That is the speciality. However, it is probably true to say that showbiz is the most thoroughly entertainment oriented of all types of performance, and that notions of myth, art, instruction, dream, and ritual may be equally important, even at the conscious level, with regard to, say, westerns, the news, soap opera, or rock music. It is important, I think, to stress the cultural and historical specificity of entertainment. The kinds of performance produced by professional entertainment are different in audience, performers, and above all intention to the kind of performance produced in tribal, feudal, or socialist societies. So there are entertainment programs and entertainment oriented performances in various other societies, like folk traditions or in socialist societies. So but they are different from these showbiz programs or programs like musicals. What is the difference? It is not possible here to provide the detailed historical and anthropological argument to back this up. So he is not dealing about the difference between all these in an anthropological sense of the term, or in a historical point of view. But I hope the difference will suggest themselves when I say that entertainment is a type of performance produced for profit, performed before a generalized audience of the public by a trained paid group who do nothing else but produce performances which have the sole or conscious aim of providing pleasure. So here he is giving the definition of entertainment. What is an entertainment? Then we will be able to see how it is different from the typical performances which we can see in folk traditions or in other societies. So entertainment here is a type of performance produced for profit. The aim of it is profit, performed before a generalized audience or the public by a trained paid group professional groups who do nothing else but produce performance, which have the sole aim of or conscious aim of providing pleasure. So we have been discussing in art and literature, for example, from the time of Plato, what is the purpose of art and literature, whether it is to instruct or to please, and there will be different points taken by different all. But these programs, like those programs which we usually categorize as showbiz, they have only one aim, that is providing pleasure and getting profit out of it. That is another side, because entertainment is produced by professional entertainers, not by amateur or ritualized based group. It is by professional groups. It is also largely defined by them. So since they are done by professionals, it is defined by them. That is to say, although entertainment is part of the coinage of everyday thought, nonetheless how it is defined, what it is assumed to be, is basically decided by those people responsible or paid for providing it in a concrete form. So only those who are part of it, or those who are part of it, have a large role in defining its content and nature. Professional entertainment is the dominant agency for defining what entertainment is. This doesn't mean, however, that it is simply reproduces and expresses patriarchal capitalism. So when we say that it is produced by certain groups for profit, and they have a large role in deciding its content or defining it, we usually jump into the conclusion that then it is capitalist motivated, or the ideology of patriarchal capitalism is working behind it. And he is not rejecting it, he is saying that it is not simply that. You cannot simply say that it expresses or reproduces the capitalist or patriarchal capitalism. There is the usual struggle between capital and labor, the backers and the performance over control of the product. And professional entertainment is unusual in that, firstly, it is in the business of producing forms, not things. And secondly, the workforce or the performers themselves is in a better position to determine the form of its product than say secretaries or car workers. So when we talk about it is produced by somebody for profit and all that, we will have this general confusion. We will have in every product, in every scenario, there will be this labor and capital, and the conflict between labor and capital is significant in other areas. Like if it is a factory, there will be this conflict between the labor and capital, or the entrepreneur and the laborers. But here in this case it is different, because it is not producing like products, like factory products. They are producing forms, not things. Secondly, the workforce or the performers in it, they are in a better position to determine the form of its product than say secretaries or co-workers. You can refuse it or reject it, whatever, but he says that the performers in a musical, or those performers in the showbiz, they are in a better position than the common laborers. The fact that professional entertainment has been by and large conservative in this century shouldn't blind us to the implicit struggle within it. There are struggles within it, and looking beyond class to divisions of sex and race, we should note the important role of structurally subordinate groups in society, women, black, gays, in the development and definition of entertainment. So there are other marginalized groups actively part of this. In other words, show business relationship to the demands of patriarchal capitalism is a complex one. However, it is not a simple, there is a relationship, or they are controlled by maybe controlled by patriarchal capitalism, but it is a very complex one. Just as it doesn't simply give the people what they want, since it actually defines those wants. So as a relatively autonomous mode of cultural production, it doesn't simply reproduce unproblematically patriarchal capitalist ideology. So you need to focus on the words. Just as it doesn't simply give the people what they want. No, since it is entertainment, you cannot just simply say that entertainment programs give the people what they want. Instead, we need to say that this want, which the audience desires, is also created by the capitalist machinery. So that is at one level, but at the same time, it is relatively an autonomous mode of cultural production. It is an autonomous, since it is an autonomous mode of cultural production, it doesn't simply reproduce unproblematically patriarchal capitalist ideology. Indeed, it is precisely on seeming to achieve both these often opposed functions simultaneously that its survival largely depends. So there are different aims. It is a relatively autonomous mode of cultural expression, but at the same time it has this capitalist or patriarchal ideology behind it. So it's a complex relationship. Two of the taken for granted descriptions of entertainment. So when we talk about entertainment programs, we usually see that entertainments are just escape. Why entertainment exists, or why, what is the significance of it? What is it? When we talk about all those, we usually say that entertainments as escape from the problems of the present world, or escaping. In order to escape from the turbulence of this present world, we usually watch movies, things like that. And as wish fulfillment, another way in which we normally define entertainment is a wish fulfillment. When the hero beats the villain, a corrupt politician, it's a wish fulfillment for the audience. There are that kind of a psychological kind of interpretation. So these are the two ways in which we normally view entertainment programs. One is as escape, and the second is as wish fulfillment. So it points to its central thrust, namely utopianism. So when we say that an entertainment program is an escape from the burdens of the real life, the problems of the real life, the turbulence of a real life, or it is a wish fulfillment, those wishes we cannot fulfill in our real life, we are satisfying by seeing it on screen. So when we say that entertainment is wish fulfillment or escapism, it denotes that it is utopia. And what is an utopia? Utopia is those kind of an imaginary world where everything is good and well. So entertainment offers the image of something better to escape into, something we want deeply that our day-to-day lives don't provide. So that is the significance of it. Alternatives, hopes, wishes, these are the stuff of utopia. The sense that things could be better, that something other than what is can be imagined and may be realized. Why we, for example, celebrate Onam. മാവേലി നാട് വാണിയിടും കാലം മനുഷ്യരെല്ലാവരും ഒന്നുപോലെ. There is this view of a better world. So entertainment programs gives this sense of a better world where our unfulfilled desires can be fulfilled, or it is an escape. So when we talk about all this, we are in fact referring to the utopian aspect of it. Entertainment doesn't, however, present models of utopian worlds, as in the classic utopias of Thomas More, William Morris, etc. So when we say that entertainment is an utopia, it doesn't simply mean the utopianism of Thomas More or William Morris. Rather, the utopianism is contained in the feelings it embodies. What kind of feelings it embodies. It presents head on, as it were, what utopia would feel like, rather than how it would be organized. So it is not talking about how to organize an utopian world, but the feelings it generates is helps us in that. So it thus works at the level of sensibility. So he is talking about the utopian sensibility which the entertainment programs tries to create. There is this sensibility that works in the imaginary realm, or in the realm of feeling, by which I mean an affective code that is characteristic of and largely specific to a given mode of cultural production. So there is this code, this affective code. This code uses both representational and, importantly, non-representational signs. So entertainment programs uses both representational signs and non-representational signs. He is coming out with a semiotic kind of analysis. There is a tendency to concentrate on the former, which means representational. When we say representational, it represents something, it represents the real life or something like that. There are elements in an entertainment program which is representational of something else, which represents something else. There are elements in it, and it clearly would be wrong to overlook them. Stars are nicer than we are, characters more straightforward than people we know, situations more soluble than those we encounter, All this we recognize through representational science. But we also recognize qualities in non-representation science. So there are also non-representation science like color, texture, movement, rhythm, melody, camera work. Although we are much less used to talking about them. So when we talk about teleserials or films, we talk about the is real a relationship with reality. But there are other non-representational codes of science in it. The nature of non-representation science is not, however, so different that of representation. So how is it being? They are not so much different. So he is using the terminology of Charles Sanders Peirce, whose semiotic theory, in which he says that all thought is in science. He says that every sign refers either through similarity to its object, that is icon, or through factual connection to its object, that is symbol. This is the way Charles Sanders Peirce theorizes it. So both are, means the representational and non-representation signs are, in Peirce terminology, largely iconic. Iconic means it refers either through similarity or similarity to its object. Okay, so he is using that terminology by Peirce. But whereas the relationship between signifier and signified in a representational icon is one of resemblance between their appearance, their look, their relationship. In the case of the non-representational icon is one of the resemblance at the level of basic structuration. So there is this differentiation. This concept has been developed, among other places, in the work of Zuzanne K. Lange, particularly in relation to music. There are other critics who studied about it, especially with regard to music. We are moved by music, yet it has the least obvious reference to reality. The intensity of our response to it can only be accounted for by the way music, abstract, formal though it is, still embodies feeling. So we watch a theatrical dramatic performance because it is somehow representational to the reality. But we enjoy music, but we may not be able to connect it with reality normally. For example, a classical music program, how it can be related to reality. So it has least obvious reference to reality, but it stimulates our feelings. The tonal structures, she says that, Susanne K. Lange says that the tonal structures we call music bear a close logical similarity to the forms of human feelings, forms of growth and of attenuation, flowing and stowing, conflict and resolution, speed, arrest, terrific excitement, calm or subtle activation or dreamy lapses, not joy and sorrow perhaps, but the poignancy of both, the greatness and brevity and eternal passing of everything vitally felt. Such is the pattern or logical form of sentience. And the pattern of music is that same form worked in pure measures, sound and silence. Music is a tonal analog of emotive life. Such a formal analogy or concurrence of logical structures is the prime requisite for the relationship between a symbol and whatever to is to mean. The symbol and the object symbolized must have some common logical form. So she is comparing it with its logical form. Lange realizes that the recognition of a common logical form between a performance sign and whatever it signifies is not always easy or natural. The congruence of two given perceptible forms is not always evident upon simple inspection. The common logical form they both exhibit may become apparent only when you know the principle whereby to relate them. This implies that responding to a performance is not spontaneous. You have to learn what emotion is embodied before you can respond to it. So it is not a spontaneous response. A problem with this, as Lange develops it, is the implication that the emotion itself is not coded, is simply human feeling. I would be inclined, however, to see almost as much coding in the emotions as in the science for them. So the emotions are also coded. Thus, just as writers such as E.H. Gombrich and Umberto Eco stress the different modes of representation in history and culture correspond to different modes of perception. So it is important to grasp the modes of experiential art and entertainment correspond to different culturally and historically determined sensibilities. So our sensibilities are also determined by cultural and historical factors. This becomes clear when one examines how entertainment forms come to have the emotional significance they do. That is, by acquiring these their signification in relation to the complex of meaning in the socio-cultural situations in which they are produced. It has some kind of an influence in the meanings they generate. Take the extremely complex history of tap dance. So he's equating it with tap dance, a kind of a performance in black culture, dance step followed by tapping in the using the feet. In black culture, tap dance has had an improvisatory, self-expressive, and self-expressive function similar to that in jazz. So tap dance performance and jazz performance are similar. And in minstrelsy, it's another theatrical it's a kind of another performance, a kind of a ballad form sung by minstrels. It took on an aspect of jolly mindlessness, inane good humor, in accord with minstrelsy's image of the Negro. In vaudeville, it's another performance type. Elements of mechanical skill, tap dance as a feat, was stressed as part of vaudeville's celebration of the machine and the brilliant performer. Clearly, there are connections between these different significations, and these are residues of all of them in tap as used in films, television, and contemporary theatre shows. This has little to do, however, with the intrinsic meanings of hard, short, percussive, syncopated sounds arranged in patterns and produced by the movement of feet, and everything to do with the significance such sounds accrue from their place within the network of signs in a given culture at a given point of time. So the cultural specificity of tap dancing is talking about. Nevertheless, the signification is essentially apprehended through the coded non-representation form. Although the representation elements usually present in a performance sign, a dancer is always a person dancing, may help to anchor the necessarily more fluid significations of the non-representation elements. For example, a black man, a white man in blackface, a troupe, or a white woman tap dancing may suggest different ways of reading the taps, because each relates to a slightly different moment in the evolution of the non-representational form tap dance. So the non-representational elements also have some kind of significance. I have labeled this point at greater length than may seem warranted, partly with a polemic intent. So he's talking about the intention of discussing all those. First, it seems to me that the reading of non-representation science in the cinema is particularly undeveloped. So as far as film is concerned, the non-representation science in a film is also significant, but it is also one of the most underdeveloped area. On the one hand, the mise-en-scene approach, the arrangement of the scenes and properties to represent a kind of, another word for example, for setting, at least classically developed in movie, tends to treat the non-representational as a function of the representational, simply a way of bringing out, emphasizing aspects of plot, character, situation without signification in their own right. So in the typical scenario, the non-representational elements are used only in order to assist the representational codes. Secondly, I feel that film analysis remains notoriously non-historical, the way film analysis has been going on, except in rather lumbering simplistic ways. Even if there are historical kind of analysis, they are simplistic. My adaptation of Langer seeks to emphasize not the connection between science and historical events, personages or forces, but rather the history of science themselves as they are produced in culture and history. Nowhere here it has been possible to reproduce the detail of any science history, and I admit to speculation in some instances, but most of the assertions are based on more through research, and even where they are not, they should be. So he's saying that he has mentioned some of it, but they need a little bit more detailed discussion, but not here. So the categories of entertainment's utopian sensibility are sketched in the accompanying table 5.1 together with examples of them. So if you have the text, you can look at the table 5.1, in which he is talking about the 5 types of utopian sensibilities, which are energy, abundance, intensity, transparency, and community. 5 types of utopian sensibilities: energy, abundance, intensity, transparency, and community. And he has given examples of all these 5 types of uh, sensibilities as well. The 3 films used will be discussed below. So he has made use of 3 films or musicals in order to discuss these utopian sensibilities. The examples from westerns and television news are just to suggest how the categories may have wider application. So in the table he has been given examples of other types because he believes that it may have wider application. The sources referred to are the cultural, historical situations of the court's production. The categories are, I hope, clear enough. So when we talk about these categories, 5 types of energy, abundance, intensity, transparency, communities, all these are so clear. No, when we talk about energy, it means capacity to act vigorously, the human power, activity, potential, etc. Abundance means conquest of scarcity, having enough to spare without sense of poverty of others, enjoyment of sensuous material reality. Intensity means the experiencing of emotion directly, fully, unambiguously, authentically, without holding back. A quality of relationships. Transparency means the quality of relationship between represented characters. For example, true love between performer and audience, sincerity. And also, the last point is community, which means togetherness, sense of belonging, network of fatigue relationship, etc. So all these are the utopian sensibilities which we can find in musicals, which we may not be able to find in the real human life. Understand? For example, when we have a lack of energy in our life, okay, or there is this lack of community feeling. We are all living in kind of small families. We have that lack of feeling of that community. So all these lack are being represented in the utopian world of musicals or film. So he says that among these 5 categories, uh, you know he is dealing explaining one aspect a little bit more in detail. So says that the categories are, I hope, clear enough, but a little more needs to be said about intensity. So intensity has been mentioned in the table as something experiencing of emotions directly, fully, and ambiguously, or authentically without holding back. We in our present world we may not be able to express our feelings authentically without holding back. So intensity. So he says that he may need to elaborate it further. It is hard to find a word that quite gets what I mean. What I have in mind, intensity, he says that it is the capacity of entertainment to present either complex or unpleasant feelings. For example, involvement in personal or political events, jealousy, loss of love, defeat, in a way that makes them seem uncomplicated, direct, and vivid, not qualified or ambiguous. Day to day life makes them, and without intimations of self deception and pretense. For example, in the group discussion in WhatsApp, we have a discussion on teleserials, and we talked about why people watch teleserials. So there are certain feelings which we may not be able to express so directly in our inner heart. There are certain feelings in our inner heart which we may not be feeling it very fine to express in a society, like jealousy or things like that, which are being represented in the teleseries. We talked about that. So intensity is the capacity of entertainment to present either complex or unpleasant feelings. We have complex or unpleasant feelings. For example, involvement in a personal or political event, or jealousy, we cannot express it directly in our, may not be, or loss of love or defeat, that feeling, in a way that makes them seem uncomplicated, direct, and vivid, not qualified or ambiguous day to day, as day to day life makes them. and without intimations of self-deceptions and pretense. So we will have to be hypocrites, or we will have to, pretend certain emotions in our day-to-day life, which are being represented in the movies or serials. Both intensity and transparency can be related to wider themes in the culture, as authenticity and sincerity, respectively. The obvious problem raised by this breakdown of the utopian sensibility is where these categories come from. So we have five utopian sensibilities mentioned. One answer at a very broad level might be that they are a continuation of the utopian tradition in Western thought. So we have this tradition of utopian thought in Western society. Joe Kateb describes what he takes to be the dominant motives in this tradition, and they do broadly overlap with those outlined above. So what are the major ideas we get when we analyze utopian works? He says that when a man thinks of perfection, he thinks of a world permanently without strife, poverty, constraint, stultifying labor, irrational authenticity, central deprivation, peace, abundance, leisure, equality, consonance of men and their environment. When we talk about Onam, കള്ളവുമില്ല, ചതിയുമില്ല, എള്ളോളമില്ല, പൊളിവചനം. So these are certain things which we find in an utopian. These are certain things which we want when we think about perfection. We may agree that notions in this broad conceptual area are common throughout Western thought, giving it and its history, its characteristic dynamic, its sense of moving beyond what ought to be or what we want to be. However, the very broadness and looseness of this common ground doesn't get us very far. We need to examine the specificity of entertainment's utopia. So what specifically the entertainment's utopia want? One way of doing so is to see the categories of the sensibilities as temporary answers to the inadequacies of the society which is being escaped from through entertainment. So these categories, we have talked about 5 categories, which are all the answers to the inadequacies of the societies which is being escaped from through entertainment. So in entertainment, we are trying to escape from the burdens of the present world. So we have certain inadequacies, and the answers to that inadequacies can be found in those entertainment programs. This is proposed by Hans Magnus Enzensberger in his work Constituents of a Theory of the Media. He takes issue with the traditional left-wing uses of concepts of manipulation and false needs in relation to the mass media. So when we talk about mass media and etc., in the point of view of a left-wing left theorist, they will be talking about the manipulation or the false consciousness or false news, etc. So he says that Hans Magnus, the electronic media do not owe their irresistible power to any sleight of hand, but to the elemental power of deep social needs, which come through even in the present depraved form of these media. Consumption as spectacle contains the promise that one will disappear. The deceptive, brutal, and obscene features of this festival derived from the fact that there can be no question of a real fulfillment of this promise. But so long as scarcity holds away, use value remains a decisive category which can only be abolished by trickery. So all these ideas which are being discussed in connection with utopias, they never will be able to fulfill. We will never be able to create a society where everyone is equal. So, but at the same time, it will have demand. Every society wants to create that kind of a society. Yet, trickery on such a scale is only conceivable if it is based on mass need. So, there is a mass need. This need, it is an utopian one, is there. The need for perfection. That has demand. It is the desire for a new ecology, for a breaking down of environmental barriers, for an aesthetic which is not limited to the sphere of the artistic. These desires are not primarily internalized rules of the games as played by the capitalist system. So these desires are not simply created by the capitalist system. They have physiological roots and can no longer be suppressed. Consumption as spectacle is, in parody form, the anticipation of a utopian situation. This does, I think, express well the complexity of the situation. However, Enzensberger's appeal to elemental and physiological demands, although we do not need to be too frightened by them, is lacking in both historical and anthropological perspectives. So there are some problems with Enzensberger's analysis. I would rather suggest a little over schematically that the categories of the utopian sensibilities are related to specific inadequacies in societies. I'll illustrate this in table 5.2. So here in the table 5.2, he's talking about certain specific inadequacies in society which the entertainment programs tries to give answers to. So we talked about the five different utopian sensibilities like abundance, energy, intensity, transparency, and community. So this utopian solution of abundance, abundance, which means the elimination of poverty for self and others, equal distribution of wealth. This utopian sensibility comes from the social tension or inadequacy or real life absence of something, which means the scarcity. So the actual poverty in the society, poverty observably in the surrounding societies, for example the third world countries, and equal distribution of wealth, these are all social realities which led to the utopian sensibility called abundance. And again, there are problems in our real world like exhaustion, work as a grind, alienated labor, pressures of urban life, which lead to the sensibility or the utopian solution of energy, work and play synonymous, city dominated, or pastoral return, such kinds of solutions. So there are dreariness or monotony, predictability, instrumentality of the daily round in the real life. As an answer to that, we have intensity in as an utopian solution in the programs. For example, the excitement, the drama, the affectivity of living, these are all. And again, in the real life, we will have manipulation. We can find manipulation everywhere: advertising, bourgeois democracy, sex roles, all these are. So as an answer to that, we have transparency in as an utopian solution in films. For example, open, spontaneous, honest communications and relationship. And again, another problem we face in society is fragmentation. For example, job mobility, rehousing and development, high-rise flats, legislating against collective action. These are our problems. So as an answer to that problem, we have this utopian solution in entertainment programs, which is community. All together in one place, communal interest, collective activity, all these can be seen in films and example. So it is not just leftovers from history. It is not just wash or business or they force on the rest of us. So we cannot simply say that, as the Marxian scholars would say, that these advertising or this program show business, they are forcing us something. We cannot simply say that. That is not simply the case. It is not simply the expression of the eternal needs. It is response to real needs created by society. So all these are response of certain problems in our real society. The weakness of the analysis, and this holds true of Eisenberg too, is in the giveaway absence from the left-hand column. No mention of class, race, or patriarchy. But of course, there are problems with this analysis. Here they are talking about certain social tension or inadequacy or certain absence and the solutions, utopian solutions to that. But in the problems mentioned in the left hand column, we cannot find problems of class or race or patriarchal issues. That is one side of it. That is, while entertainment is responding to needs that are real, at the same time it is also defining and delimiting what constitute the legitimate needs of people in the society. So what are the problems of people in our society? They are addressing certain problems of society, but at the same time certain other problems are silenced. They are not selected. I'm not trying to recoup here the false needs argument. So he's not talking about that false needs, the creation of a false need. We are talking about real needs created by real inadequacies, but they are not the only needs and inadequacies of the society. So these entertainment programs, they are really talking about some inadequacies in society, but the problem is that they are not the only problems or inadequacies in our society. Yet entertainment, by so orienting itself to them, effectively denies the legitimacy of other needs and inadequacies, and especially of class, patriarchal, and sexual struggles. Though once again we have to admit the complexity and contradictions of the situation, that for instance, entertainment is not the only agency which defines legitimate needs. and that the actual role of women, gay men, and blacks in the creation of show business leaves its mark in such a central opposition icons as respectively the strong woman type, example Ethel Merman, Judy Garland, Elsie Tanner, cam humor and sensuous taste in dress and decor, and almost all aspects of dance and music. Class, it will be noted, is still novel. So there are certain issues which are being represented, racial issues, but at the same time, class issues we cannot find much. So class, race, and sexual taste are denied validity as problems by the dominant or bourgeois white male ideology of society. We shouldn't expect show business to be markedly different. So in society, these are all being sidelined by the bourgeois society. So the same can be found in show business as well. However, there is one further turn of the screw, and that is that, with the exception perhaps community, the most directly working class source, the ideals of entertainment imply wants that capitalism itself promises to meet. Thus, abundance becomes consumerism, energy and intensity, personal freedom and individualism, and transparency, freedom of speech. So, these problems are identified by the capitalist society. The needs which they are talking about is created by capitalist society. The answer, the utopian answers to those problems are also created by this capitalist machinery. For example, abundance. When we talk about abundance in, there are problems of lack or poverty in society, and as a result we are showing an utopian sensibility of abundance in entertainment programs. But that abundance becomes consumerism. And energy and intensity, these are all representations of personal freedom and individualism are being shown as answers. And transparency became freedom of speech. In other words, especially Marcus, Herbert Marcus words, it is a partially one-dimensional situation. The categories of the sensibility point to gaps or inadequacies in capitalism, but only those gaps or inadequacies that capitalism proposes itself to deal with. So not all problems are being dealt with. They only deal those problems which they find easy to or manipulate to. At our worst sense of it, entertainment provides alternatives to capitalism, which will be provided by capitalism. So they are showing alternative to capitalism, but those alternatives are also being provided by capitalism. However, this one dimensionality is seldom so hermetic or completely sealed because of the deeply contradictory nature of entertainment forms. In variety kind of a program, the essential contradiction is between comedy and music turns. In musicals, it is between the narrative and the numbers. Both these contradictions can be rendered as one between the heavily representational and verisimilitudinous, pointing to the where the world is, drawing on the audience concrete experience of the world, and the heavily non-representational and unreal, point to how things could be better. In musicals, contradiction is also to be found at two other levels: within numbers, between the representational and the non-representational, and within the non-representational, due to the different sources of production inscribed in the science. So there is this contradiction between the representational and the non-representational in music, and also within the non-representational science there will be some other contradictions as well. To be effective, the utopian sensibility has to take off from the real experiences of the audience. So in order to be effective, the utopian sensibility has to be real life oriented. Yet to do this, to draw attention to the gap between what is and what could be, is ideologically speaking playing with the fire. So we cannot clearly say what is and what could be. What musicals have to do then, not through any conspiratorial intent, but because it is always easy to take the line of least resistance, that is to fit in with the prevailing norms, is to work through these contradictions at all levels in such a way as to manage them, to make them seem to disappear. So they will be, of course, taking those elements which are not much resisted, or those items which are based on the prevailing norms, and they will be managing and making them seeming to disappear certain problems. They don't always succeed. So as it has been mentioned, some of the problems will not be taken into consideration. Okay, I have chosen 3 musicals. So here in this text he is talking about 3 musicals. One is The Gold Diggers of 1933, secondly Funny Face, and thirdly On the Town. Three musical programs, which seem to me to illustrate the three broad tendencies of musicals. So there are three broad tendencies in musicals. One is those that keep narrative and number clearly separated. There are musicals in which the narrative aspect and the number, they are clearly separated. Then there retain the division between narrative as problems and numbers as escape, but try to integrate the numbers by a whole set of papering over the cracks devices. For example, the well-known cue for a song. So there are the second type of category in which narrative presents the problems and numbers presents the escapes or the solutions. And thirdly, there are those which try to dissolve the distinction between narrative and numbers, thus implying that the world of the narrative was also utopian. Okay, already the world of the narrative, the problems are also utopian. The clear separation of numbers and narrative in Gold Diggers of 1933 is broadly in line with the realist aesthetic. The numbers occur in the film in the same way as they occur in life, that is, on stages and in cabaret. This realism is of course reinforced by the social realistic orientation of the narrative, setting and characterization, with their emphasis on depression, poverty, the quest for capital, gorging or prostitution, gold digging. So this is somehow realist in the sense that in 1933, that is the year 1930s, the era of dark, Great Depression. So all those issues are being discussed. However, the numbers are not wholly contained by this realistic aesthetic. The way in which they are opened out in scale and in cinematic treatment, overhead shots, etc., represents a quite marked shift from the real to the non-real, and from the largely representational to the largely non-representational, sometimes to the point of almost complete abstraction. The thrust of the narrative is towards seeing the show as a solution to the personal, depression-induced problems of the characters. Yet the non-realistic presentation of the numbers makes it very hard to take this solution seriously. It is just escape, merely utopia. So there are characters who are facing severe problems due to the depression, but at the last of the musicals program, Gold Diggers, at the end of it, they find some kind of a solution. They met with a millionaire child and find create a relationship with them, and ultimately they become successful. But at the same time, they are not addressing the systemic problems. So it is just an escape. Or even though they represent the real life problems, the solutions offered by the entertainment or the musical is utopian. If the numbers embody capitalist palliatives means solutions to the problems of the narrative, chiefly abundance, spectacle in place of poverty, and a non-efficacious energy, coherence in self-enclosed patterns in place of dispiritedness, then the actual mode of presentation undercuts this by denying it the validity of realism. So the solutions presented are capitalist solutions. The problems, instead of poverty, dispiritedness, etc., we can find abundance and energy, etc., in the work, but the solutions are not realistic. However, if one looks at the contradiction between the representational and non-representational within the numbers, this becomes less clear-cut. Here, much of the representational level reprises the lessons of the narrative. Above all, that women's only capital is their bodies as objects. You can check the meaning of gold digger, the secondary meaning. There are different meanings to the word. So one signification of it is actually talking about the body as an objectification of women's body. So that kind of a sense we will be getting by watching this musical, that women's only capital is their bodies as objects. The abundant scale of the numbers is an abundance of piles of women. The sensuous materialism is the texture of femaleness. The energy of the dancing, when it occurs, is the energy of the choreographic imagination to which the dancers are subservient. Thus, while the non-representational certainly suggests an alternative to the narrative, the representational merely reinforces the narrative. Women as sexual coinage, women and men as expressions of the male producer. This is the meaning we can derive by watching the musical. Finally, if one looks at the non-representational alone, contradictions once again become apparent. Example, spectacles, materialism and metaphysics. That is, on the one hand, the sets, costumes, etc. are tactile, sensuous, physically exhilarating, but on the other hand are associated with the fairylands, magic, and the by definition of immaterial, dances human creative energy and subhuman mindlessness. So these are some of the ways in which he analyzes the musical, the Golgic. In another program, another musical, Funny Face. So in Funny Face, the central contradiction is between art and entertainment. There is this conflict between art and entertainment you can find, and this is further worked through in the antagonism between the central couple. The central couple in the musical is Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire. So Audrey Hepburn is a representative of the art, and Fred Astaire is the representative of entertainment. The numbers are escape from the problems and discomforts of the contradiction, either by asserting the unanswerably more pleasurable qualities of entertainment, or in the transparency of love in the Hepburn Astaire numbers. So you can there are examples given from the musical program in the text. You can watch it in YouTube, but it is not always that neat. In the empathicalist cellar club, Hepburn escapes Astaire in a number with some of the other beers in the club. This reserves the escape direction of the rest of the film. That is, it is in the escape from entertainment to art, or escape from Astaire to something. Yet within the number, the contradiction repeats itself. Before Hepburn joins the group, they are dancing in a style deriving from modern dance, angular, oppositional shapes, redolent in musical convention of neurosis and pretentiousness. Examples are given. As the number proceeds, however, more showbiz elements are introduced. Use of syncopated clapping, forming in a vaudeville lineup, the American theatre ballet shapes, all these are being integrated. Here, an art form is taken over and infused with the values of entertainment. This is a contradiction between the representational, means the diary nightclub, and the non-representational, the oomph of music and movement, but also within the non-representational between different dance forms. The contradiction between art and entertainment is thus repeated at each level. So in the program, in the musical Funny Face, the central idea is the contradiction between art and entertainment, and in every level this contradiction has been repeated. In the love numbers too, contradictions appear, partly by the continuation in the theme of in them of troubling representational elements. In Funny Face, photographs of Hepburn as seen by Astaire, the fashion photographer, are projected on the wall as background to his wooing her and her giving in. Again, their final dance of reconciliation too as wonderful takes place in the grounds of a statue beneath the trees, with the doves fluttering around them. The figures are being given. Earlier, this setting was used as the finish for their fashion photography sequence. In other words, in both cases, she is reconciled to him only by capitulating to his definition of her. So he has a definition of her and she succumbed to that. In itself, there is nothing contradictory in this. It is what Ginger Rogers always had to do. But here the mode of reconciliation is transparency, and yet we can see the strings of the number being pulled. So the element of utopian sensibility used here is transparency. Thus the representational elements which bespeak manipulation of romance contradict the non-representational, which is bespeak is transparency. The two tendencies just discussed are far more common than the third, which has to suggest that utopia is implicit in the world of the narrative as well as in the world of the numbers. That idea of utopia is both there in the narrative as well as in the numbers. The commonest procedure for doing this is removal of the whole film in time and space to turn of the century America, Europe or Cockney London, black communities, etc., to places that is where it can be believed by white urban Americans that song and dance are in the air, built into the peasant black culture and blood, or part of the more free and easy stage in American development. So all these actions have been taken into another world, a industrialized world or something. So when we talk about in literature and all that, we present the pre-industrialized era or something beautiful where everyone lives in equilibrium, things in harmony, things like that. So all these are being put it in the background in the turn of the century America, or the past Europe, or Cockney London, or black communities in the past, or the peasant communities, which the white urban Americans thinks that filled with song and dance in the air, or peasant culture or black culture, things like that. In these films, the introduction of any real narrative concerns is usually considerably delayed and comes chiefly as a temporary threat to utopia, thus reversing the other two patterns where the narrative predominates and number function as temporary escape from it. Not much happens plot-wise in Meet Me in St. Louis until we have had Meet Me in St. Louis, The Boy Next Door, The Trolley Song, and Skid to Mallow. Only then does father comes along with his proposal to dismantle this utopia by his job mobility. Most of the contradictions developed in these films are overridingly brought off by the nostalgia or primitivism which provides them with the point of departure. So in these works we can find that nostalgia for past, or that primitivism, that period in which everything was good and fine. Far from pointing forwards, they point back to a golden age, a reversal of utopianism that is only marginally offset by the narrative motive of recovery of utopia. So when we talk about utopia, we will be talking about normally a creation of a better world in the future. But these utopias they are taking us back. So when we talk about Onam as well, we are talking about a golden age in the past. There are several works in which the good old nostalgia of the colonial period in our own society, we can find all this. What makes On the Town interesting is that its utopia is a well-known modern society. So whereas this present work, the funny face, in it the utopia is an ancient word. In the work On the Town, in the musical On the Town, the utopia is a well-known modern city. The film starts as an escape from the confines of Navy life into the freedom of New York, and also from the weariness of work embodied in the darkest refrain. I feel like I'm not out of bed yet, into the energy of leisure, as the sailors leap into the city for their day off. So this is the idea of it. This energy runs through the whole film, including the narrative. In most musicals, the narrative represents things as they are to be escaped from. But most of the narrative of On the Town is about the transformation of New York into utopia. So here, New York itself is the utopia. The sailors release the social frustrations of the women, a tired taxi driver just coming off shift, a hard-up dancer reduced to belly dancing to pay for ballet lessons, a woman with a sexual appetite that is deemed improper, not so much through love and sex as through energy. This sense of the sailors as transforming energy is heightened by the sense of pressure on the narrative movement suggested by the device of a time check flashed on the screen intermittently. This gives a historical dimension to a musical, that is, it shows people making utopia rather than just showing them from time to time finding themselves in it. So here they are making utopia, but the people are men. So there is this problem. They are talking about a real utopia, the making up of a utopia, but here the world is created by men, not women. It is still men making history, not men and women together. And Lucy Miller's role is unforgivably male chauvinist. In this context, the prehistoric man number is particularly interesting. It centers on Anne Miller, and she leaves the others in the takeover of the museum. For a moment then, a woman makes history. So there is this reversal of the role in that kind of an utopia. But the whole number is riddled with the contradictions and revolves around the very problem of having an image of a woman acting historically. If we take the number and her part in it to pieces, we can see that it plays on an opposition between self-willed and mindless modes of being, and this plays between representational and non-representational at all aesthetic levels. So the role of that woman in one song, if we take it, there is this contradiction, self-willed versus the mindless. So you can go through that table in the work. The idea of a historical utopianism in narrativity derives from the work of Ernest Bloch. So here in the concluding part of the essay, he is talking about the historical utopianism in narrativity based on Ernest Bloch. According to Frederick Jameson, Bloch has essentially two different languages or terminological systems at his disposition to describe the formal nature of utopian fulfillment. The movement of the world in time towards the future ultimate moment, and the more spatial notion of that adequation of object to subject which must characterize that moment's content. These correspond to dramatic and lyrical modes of presentation of not yet being. So it is talking about a future, a formal nature of the utopian fulfillment. So the musicals and variety represents an extraordinary mix of these two modes, the historicity of narrative and the lyricism of the number. So it has these two qualities. One, the historicity of the narrative, the historical problems in which it is trying to advance, and the lyricism of the numbers. They have not often taken advantage of it, but the point is that they could, and that this possibility is always latent in them. They are a form we still need to look at if films are impressed words on the theater to organize the enjoyment of changing reality. So thus he concludes the essay by talking about the various musicals, by taking three examples of musicals and how it is an utopia of the present world problems. Thank you.